So I have my pen blank the right length of the tube, and I have it standing up in a pillar drill vise. So I'm just going to drill right through this blank, ready to receive the tube. There we go. Now we're right through the blank. Before we leave the drill, I'm going to show you what we're going to do with what will be the sharp point or the business point of the dart. If you imagine the pen kit, you have your nib, your twister barrel, your ink filament, you have the back, and you have the clip, and then you have two tubes. Well, the part that I have now in my hand is the back nub that you put in that holds the clip. So it's the back little nub that goes and holds the clip. These are just cheap slimline kits, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that also in my drill press vise, so it's sitting with the large part of it facing downwards, and I'm going to get a drill bit. Now what I'm using for the nib of the darts are the 40mm ring shank nails, and they have the flat head, so they're the kind of ring shank nails that you'd use for fence panels and things like that, and that's what they are. They're just 40mm ring shank, and the best way to describe how wide they are is literally they're the width of a dart, the end of a dart. So that's how they're perfect. So I need a drill bit. I couldn't get a drill bit that was exactly the right size because they're an odd size. I couldn't get a drill bit so that they were nice and snug. So what I'm using is I'm using a drill bit that's close enough but slightly smaller, and then I'm using a carbide rotary ball to just make the hole slightly bigger, and that will expand the hole. I'll just put the drill bit into the drill, and what we're going to do is we are going to drill through, straight through the center of that back cap, because that back cap is now going to be the front of our dart. Okay, so I'm going to drill a hole through the center. There we go. If you can see that. And now I'm just going to put the carbide bit in, and I will just expand that hole. And there we go. So now we have a hole right through the center of that cap, and it is the right size for said nail to slide in, and then we'll be gluing that, and that becomes the front end of your dart. So as you can see there, I'm not sure if that's focusing enough, but the head of the nail is now too big. It's a bit bigger than the part that goes into the tube. So now we need to sand down the head so it's slightly smaller. So we've just got a disc in on a Jacob's chuck, and all I do is I just roll the head of the nail round. Now sometimes these nails won't be centered. The heads won't be centered to the shaft of the nail, but you can kind of guesstimate it and get it close enough. We only want to make it small enough that it doesn't obviously fit through the hole and fall out when we throw it into the dartboard. There you go, as quick as that. Now the head of my nail is smaller than the nub that goes into the tube, and that'll all slide together lovely jubbly. What we want to do now is we want to get some super glue, and then we just literally stick that into our end cap, slide the nail through and stick it in. We don't have to sharpen the nail yet. We can do that when the dart's finished. So there you go. So the best way I can describe it is, now that we've done it, it looks like a pot rivet. So that's how you make the business end of the dart. Okay. Next, we need to get the pen mandrel into the old lathe Rooney, which we shall do now. When you do a set of darts, you're going to need four tubes, not 3 tubes. You're going to need 4 tubes. You need to stick your tubes into the blank that we drilled. You get some sandpaper, and I'm sorry for those of you that know how to do this, and you need to scuff up your brass tubes. Literally, I just super glue them in. A lot of people don't really like super glue for pens. Again, they use Gorilla Glue or epoxy, but I've never had issues with using super glue. That's it. You just stick your tube into your blank. Okie dokie. Pen mandrel in. Put 2 blanks on, and I will explain why. I know we're only making 1 dart, so we are putting 2 on, because what we're going to do is, I'll show you with the other dart that I have made. So I've now put 2 of the pen blanks onto my mandrel, and what we're going to do is we're going to make, I'm holding one of the finished darts that I've made up to the camera right now, and the finished dart is made up of 2 tubes. You have a full-size pen blank at the front, at the business end where the point goes, and then at the back we have the little chrome or brass, whatever design pen you have, spacer between the 2 blanks. We have that. Then we have a 1/3 size part of the pen blank. So basically what we're going to do with the 2 pen blanks we have here is we're going to turn one as a whole pen blank, and then we're going to divide the other one up into thirds. So we're making the 3 parts for the set. And then at the very back of the dart, you then have the pen nib part, which is where the flight goes into. Use my big roughing gouge. This is my vintage roughing gouge that I'm going to use, because I like it because it's kind of skewish type roughing gouge. It's nice. I just like it. It's got it has a wide curve on it, if you see. It's nice. And it's literally, we're just going to turn them probably about 2 mil thickness all the way along the tube. We're not going to put any kind of serious shape into them. They're just going to be straight wood turn tubes or pens. Okay, so that's as thin as I'm going to go. I'm just going to bring it slightly down to, or just bring it down to the bushings, obviously, both ends. Now there is more turning to do later on with these. This isn't the turning finished, because we have to turn down the parts that we just made to make a more slimline, so they're not just a flat nub like the back of a pen. So I'm just literally turning the second one. I have the right hand one turned right down to where I want it, down to the bush thickness. I'm now turning the left one as I'm looking at it. As you're looking at it, I think it's probably the right one, down to the same thickness as the first. I've got the 2 ends of it down to the bushings, and now I'm equalizing the center to match the ends. Like I say, I'm guesstimating that the wall thickness is probably about 2 or 3 mil. So I'm just sanding this now. And as you do with pens, give them a sand with the lathe running, and then give them a sand along the grain and spin the lathe by hand. And that way you're getting rid of all the little dips and bumps in the grain. Okay, so bit of Yorkshire grit. Now, like I say, we're not putting any finish on these yet, because I might have to do a little bit of changing I just want to get the bulk of the work done. Okie dokie. So now we are going to do the rings. I've worked out that you can get round about 9 rings along the length of a pen blank. So yeah, just divide it up evenly into 9 rings. And it's just, I'm just using a 1/4 inch skew. And it's just literally just cutting little thin grooves all the way along. 1, don't go too deep because our walls aren't very thick. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so I've done the right hand one as I'm looking at it, or the left hand one as you're looking at it. So now what I need to do now is my next one, I need to decide the measurement for thirds. Now it is 50 mil long. We're going to say 15. That's the third. So about there and about there. That looks good to me. Right, so now we're going to divide each of those thirds into equal rings so it matches up to the rest. So you near enough put 2 rings into each third. Just like that. We're going to get some shavings off the floor and we're just going to burnish those rings, and that just takes any fuzzies that we have got and it also repolishes. And that way you don't fill up the rings with any grit or anything like that, Yorkshire grit or finish or anything like that. And that's it. I'm not putting any finish on those for now, and I will cut this one on the bandsaw a bit later on. So now we're taking those off. We now have 2 parts of pens turned with 9 equal segments marked onto it. One is just slightly different because we split it into thirds and then we put 2 rings in each third, just to kind of divide it up, that when we put the dart together it doesn't look odd. So I'm getting the one that I've divided into equally into 9, which would have been the one to the right or to your left, and I am going to press the tip that I made into it, just like you would a pen. Now, obviously, with a pen press, it's not going to work because you've got a big spike sticking out. So I have a hole in my drill press. So what you could use is just, I suppose you could use your vise or any, maybe a little few brass nuts piled up on top of each other. And what you're going to do is just going to drop your nail, which is in your back part of your pen, in through that hole. And then we're going to get a knocky stick and a block of wood, and we're going to carefully just tap that on. There we go. We've just knocked that into the end of our pen. Now that's the front of your dart. But we need to go back over to the lathe now, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. So now I've put the Jacob's chuck into the headstock of my lathe, and I am now fixing the nail part that we've just put into the Jacob's chuck. And we're not putting it all the way in. We're going to leave a gap of about 20 mil, maybe, so that we can work on the brass part, or what is the cap. Tighten that up and bring the tailstock up and use that to centralize the pen. So it's going into the other end of the tube. Put a little bit of pressure, not too much. Now, if it looks, when you're turning it, if it looks as if it's a little bit uneven, what you can do is you can push it and you can manipulate the nail and bend it slightly, if you know what I mean, because obviously these nails, when they make them, aren't always perfect. So now we're tightened in. We've got what is the tip, the sharp end of the dart in the Jacob's chuck. We have our tailstock brought up to the end of the tube, and we're going to use, I'm going to use my little 1/4 inch skew, and we're going to shape and turn the cap just down to a nice round slimline type air flow type. What's the words I'm thinking of? I'll just do it. These caps are generally just brass, and they're coated with like a cheap chrome. You do have to just take very light cuts. You know, don't treat it like it's wood. Let's give that a quick polish. Is that? Yeah. How's that? Can you see it? It's hard to see, but anyway, it's just rounded it off and made it look a little nicer. So we've literally just rounded off that cap. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the back part, and I am going to cut it into thirds using the bandsaw. I've got a thin, very thin toothed blade in my bandsaw. There you go, 3 equal parts chopped up. I've just literally cut the turned tube that we just done into 3 equal parts. Simple as that. Next, we need to get one of our pen nibs. Do you know the pointed pen nib that the ink travels through, the front of the pen? And we're going to push that into one of our thirds. There we go. A little bit more. Oh. I think that's in. Next, we are going to take the twist mechanism, and we're going to push that into the other end of that 1/3 tube, and we're going to push it in as far as we can get. There we go. Now it'll only go in so far, because obviously we've got a 1/3 tube. Once you put the nib in, you've only got limited space to how far that will go. Okay, so we've put that together now. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put, do you know the little spacer ring that you get that goes between the 2 pen kits, the pen parts, tubes? We're going to slide that onto the adjuster mechanism, which is on the 1/3 tube. And then we're going to push that into your other half. And we've basically got our dart then. Now what we've got to do is we've got to cut 4 slots into the end, which is the nib part, which will receive the flight. The good thing about these was the fact that you can pull this apart. You could actually cut the mechanism tube down a bit so there's not as much going in, and you can fill the other half up with lead and weight it to the weight that suits you. So in theory, they're adjustable weighted darts, so you can add whatever weight you want inside them, then push it back together again, and the weight is now inside the pen and it's adjustable. I'm going to get some masking tape, and I'm going to wrap it around the nib. And the reason for that is when I was cutting them, the bandsaw, when they were going through, because it's only thin brass, it was ripping them apart. I found then when I wrapped tape around it that it really did hold it together perfectly, and I had no issues. And what I've done is I've brought my fence up and a block of wood against the fence, and now my nib is set so it's exactly halfway. So we're cutting a slot right down the end of the nib. Now I need to decide how deep I'm going. I need to put a mark down from the end of the nib 15 millimeters onto the tape. Okay, and that's as far as the slot is going to cut down to. And then we're just going to run the pen, and we can use the wood to slide backwards and forwards. There you go, that cuts a slot in one side. Then we flip it 90 degrees, and then we cut back into it again. And that's cut our slots. And we can take the tape off. You've cut 4 slots in the end and divided the nib into 4 equal quarters, and that's where your flight is going to slide into. Now what we need to do is we need to put that back on the lathe again. So we're pulling the dart apart, slide a bushing from your mandrel over that mechanism so it goes up against your spacer that you've put on, and then put it into the Jacob's chuck up to that bushing. Tighten it up, not too hard, because Jacob's chuck can be a bit evil. Then bring your tailstock up just as a little bit of support. We're turning the spacer just so that it goes brassy looking to match the rest, and then we're also taking kind of the ugly look of the pen nib away as well. Bring the speed up. Now you don't have to do this, you could just leave it as a pen. I just found it just makes it look a bit nicer. So we're just bringing that little brass ring or ferrule down to the same width as the tube that you've turned, and then we're just going to try, if we can, just to smooth off the pen nib. It's not, you know, essential. And then we just give it a quick sanding. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of Yorkshire grit on this just to polish it up. Bring it back to black. So then we'll push our dart back together. And now I will show you how to make a flight. So we're going to get our card, which is just our insert for CD case. To make the dart flight, all you do is you need a 90mm square. Okay, so you have a 90mm square piece of paper. You then fold into triangle, corner to corner. Then you fold it triangle again. So you're half and half in it again, right? Then unfold it. You should have like a cross in the middle of the paper. You then want to fold it in on itself. This is where it kind of gets tricky, okay? But you want to kind of fold it in on itself, and that gives you this kind of effect. Now, the easiest way now is if you've got a dart flight already, is you can squash it down and put the part that goes into the end of the dart to the point of your triangle, and it will match up as the same angles and matches up the same angles, and literally just cut out the shape of the flight like so. Cut it as neat as you possibly can because it makes it fly better. You then open up your two wings, fold it back on itself again, and that is your flight. We then get the glue, and we literally just, I'm just using super glue because it's fast, but you can use Pritt stick and just glue it together like so. And that should, if we get our dart, now you might just have to spread the little cuts that you've made just to get this on. And there is your homemade dart made from a pen. Now we need to just sharpen up the tip, right? So you're just going to taper down the dart to a fine point at the end. And that is it. And you go, huh! I'll do it again just so it wasn't a fluke. There you go. Fucking bananas. Has to be a banana in every show. Bye, guys.
Bye, all.
Thank you.